Have you ever felt like you poured your heart and soul into something, only to have it snatched away? Like someone else walked off with your dreams, your effort, your very identity? It happens more often than we think. The quiet ones, the ones who just do the work, they're often the easiest targets for those who crave the spotlight, those who believe credit is just another resource to be taken. This is a story about one of those quiet ones, and how she proved that true brilliance, true worth, cannot be stolen, only revealed. Ivy Laurent knew innovation wasn't born in boardrooms, but in garages, in kitchens, in the quiet hum of a laptop at 3 in the morning. She was 34, living in a small apartment in Marseille, a city of vibrant chaos she loved, but which, at times, felt indifferent to the silent revolution she was trying to build on her second-hand computer. Ivy was not loud. She did not command attention when she walked into a room. Her presence was like soft background music, pleasant, complex if you listened closely, but easily missed in the general clamor. Her mind, however, was a storm of intricate ideas, a labyrinth of code and circuit boards and user interfaces that could streamline, that could connect, that could change things. Her latest obsession was a prototype for a smart device that optimized energy consumption in large buildings, a complex algorithm paired with elegant hardware. It wasn't just clever, it was necessary. It was the kind of idea that could save companies millions, reduce carbon footprints, and genuinely make the world a little bit better. She had met Antoine Dubois at a local tech meetup. Antoine was everything Ivy was not: charismatic, loud, connected. He had the business jargon down, the handshake firm, the smile wide and convincing. He saw the potential in Ivy's early sketches, her lines of code that hummed with efficiency. He didn't understand the how, not really, but he understood the what and, crucially, the value. He proposed they partner. He would handle the business side, the funding rounds, the marketing, the pitching. She would handle the technology, the development, the building. It seemed like a perfect match. Ivy, who had always felt a disconnect between her technical prowess and the polished world of investment and sales, was relieved. Here was someone who could bridge that gap, someone who believed in her idea enough to lend his voice, his network. They worked intensely for 18 months. Long nights fueled by strong coffee and shared unspoken dreams. Ivy poured every ounce of her being into the prototype. She refined the algorithm until it purred, designed the hardware to be intuitive and scalable, debugged relentlessly. Antoine was busy with presentations, meetings, networking events. He'd come back, full of energy, talking about potential investors, market strategies, future valuations. Ivy listened, nodded, and went back to her code. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? They were partners. They were building this together. The funding round was set. A major venture capital firm, known for big bets on disruptive tech, was interested. Antoine handled the final presentation. Ivy provided the technical specifications, the demos, the answers to potential deep dive questions. Antoine told her to focus on the tech, stay in the background during the presentation, let him handle the optics. It made sense. He was the business face, she was the technical backbone. The day of the presentation came and went in a blur. It seemed to go well. The investors, sharp-eyed men and women in expensive suits, asked penetrating questions, but Ivy had answers for everything. Antoine charmed them. There was talk of term sheets, due diligence, scaling up. A future seemed within reach, a future Ivy had only dared to dream of in her quiet apartment. The email arrived 2 weeks later. It wasn't addressed to her. It was a press release from Antoine's newly formed company, leveraging their prototype. The language was effusive, full of buzzwords about innovation and sole inventorship. Attached was confirmation of the patent filing. Antoine Dubois, sole inventor. The patent detailed her algorithm, her hardware design, her entire system. Her name was mentioned only in passing, in a footnote, as a consultant on early-stage development. A consultant. She stared at the screen, the words blurring. Consultant. The blood drained from her face. The quiet hum of her laptop suddenly felt deafening, mocking. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a typo, it was deliberate. A carefully planned excision. He hadn't just taken her idea, he had erased her from the story. She felt a cold, sickening wave wash over her. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the sheer audacity, the contempt it implied. That she wouldn't notice, or wouldn't care, or wouldn't do anything. She tried calling him. No answer. Texts went unread. Finally, a terse email from his new legal team arrived. All intellectual property is duly registered to Mr. Bias. Antoine Dubois, per the terms of the partnership agreement you signed. The partnership agreement. She scrambled to find it, the document she had skimmed, trusting Antoine, focusing only on the clauses about equity split and responsibilities. There it was, buried in dense legal jargon, a clause assigning all jointly developed IP solely to Antoine upon any dissolution of the partnership or prior to full funding, a poison pill she had swallowed unknowingly. Dissolution had been forced upon her. The funding hadn't cleared yet. Technically, legally, he owned it. The world outside her apartment continued oblivious. People were talking about Antoine Dubois, the new tech wonderkind from Marseille. His face was on local business blogs, his prototype was hailed as the next big thing. And Ivy Laurent, the architect of that thing, was back where she started, or worse. She wasn't just unknown, she was a ghost, her contribution erased from the official record. The despair was a physical weight. Days blurred into a fog of disbelief and pain. She paced her small apartment, the walls feeling like they were closing in. Every corner held a memory of working on the prototype, every sketchpad a reminder of her stolen ideas. Friends offered sympathy, advised her to sue, but the legal bills alone would be insurmountable. And the clause, legally binding, felt like an iron gate slammed shut. She saw Antoine's face everywhere. Online articles, snippets on the news. He was thriving, living the future she had built. The injustice was a bitter taste. It would have been easy to succumb to it, to curl up in a ball of self-pity and resentment. To believe that the system was rigged, that talent wasn't enough, that integrity was a weakness. For a few days, she did. The laptop remained closed. The apartment was silent, save for the distant sounds of the city. Marseille, usually a source of energy, felt indifferent, mocking. The vibrant chaos felt like a mirror of the turmoil inside her. She thought about giving up, getting a simple job, forgetting the whole thing. But then she looked at her hands. Hands that had built something from nothing. She looked at the corner of her apartment where the early prototypes had sat, crude but filled with potential, and something shifted, not anger, not primarily. Something colder, harder, and infinitely more resilient. A quiet resolve began to form, like ice crystallizing in water. He had taken her idea, yes, but he hadn't taken her mind. He hadn't taken her ability to create, to innovate, to build. He had taken the first iteration, but she was already thinking about the second, the better second. The one that incorporated the lessons learned, the mistakes made, the refinements that only came with deep, personal connection to the work. Antoine had the blueprint, the finished product as it was 18 months ago. But he didn't have the ongoing process, the intuition, the relentless drive for improvement that was hardwired into Ivy. The thought solidified. She wouldn't fight him in court for a piece of his company, built on her stolen work. She would build her own company. And she would build something superior. Something so good that it would make his stolen version obsolete. The prospect was terrifying. She had no funding, no network, no Antoine to handle the business side. She would have to do it all herself. Every pitch, every line of code, every negotiation. But the alternative, letting him win, letting him erase her, was unthinkable. It was a quiet decision, made in the solitude of her apartment, but it felt like a seismic shift. The quiet woman of Marseille decided it was time to stop being invisible. The first step was the hardest. It wasn't the technology. That came naturally. It was the sheer weight of starting over, compounded by the knowledge that her betrayer was already miles ahead, using her work. Ivy reopened her laptop. The files related to the old prototype felt tainted, like looking at photos of a past life that ended violently. She archived them. She wouldn't just refine, she would rethink. She needed a new angle, a new name, a new identity for the technology that felt entirely her own, untouched by Antoine's deceit. She spent weeks in a creative frenzy, fueled by little sleep and a fierce, cold determination. She didn't just improve the algorithm. She found a way to make it significantly more efficient, leveraging newer computing techniques that hadn't been widely available when she first started. She redesigned the hardware, making it smaller, sleeker, and cheaper to manufacture. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a leap forward. It was her intellectual property, born entirely after the betrayal, documented meticulously. She needed a name, something that spoke of efficiency, intelligence, and quiet power. After countless crumpled papers and discarded ideas, she landed on Aegis. It sounded strong, protective, smart. Aegis Systems. That would be the name. Next, she needed to build a business plan. This was uncharted territory for Ivy. She was a technologist, not a businesswoman, but she forced herself to learn. She read books, watched online lectures, devoured articles on market analysis and financial projections. It was a steep learning curve, frustrating at times, but the memory of Antoine's smug face, of the patent document with only his name, was a potent motivator. She drafted presentations, practiced her pitch aloud to her empty apartment. She had to condense her complex technology into language that investors could understand and, more importantly, believe in. She had to sell not just a product, but herself, her vision, her integrity, her capability to execute. The thought of facing investors, especially those who had just backed Antoine's venture, unaware, perhaps, of the true story, filled her with dread. They had already invested in the idea. Why would they invest in a similar idea from someone they barely knew, someone who hadn't charmed them like Antoine? This was where the cynical gatekeepers came in. Not just Antoine, but the general skepticism she faced. When she tentatively reached out to people in her limited network, mentioning she was developing a new energy optimization system, the reactions were guarded. Some offered polite encouragement, others hinted that the market space was already crowded, meaning Antoine was already there. A few, who knew the story of the betrayal, were sympathetic but also practical. Antoine has the patent, Ivy, and the funding. It will be very hard to compete. Hard, but not impossible. She knew her new system was better. The data proved it. The simulations showed double the efficiency of the original prototype. She just needed someone to listen. She made a list of potential investors. Not the top-tier firm that had backed Antoine. That door felt firmly closed for now. She targeted smaller firms, angel investors, individuals known for taking risks on innovative tech, even if the founder wasn't a seasoned CEO. Researching potential contacts took time. Finding email addresses, crafting concise introductory messages that would stand out in overcrowded inboxes. Most went unanswered. A few sent polite rejections. It was demoralizing work, a stark contrast to the pure logic and elegance of code. Each rejection felt like a tiny echo of the original betrayal, another door closing. But Ivy persevered. She reminded herself why she was doing this. It wasn't just for financial success, it was for vindication, for the principle that talent and integrity should prevail over deceit. She got a breakthrough from an unexpected source. An older investor, a man named Bernard Moreau, known for his brusque manner but also for having an eye for genuine innovation, responded. He had heard rumors about Antoine's questionable business practices and had a general distrust of overly slick presentations. His response was brief. Send details, make it concise. Hope flickered. Ivy pored over her presentation, stripping away jargon, focusing on the core value proposition. and the verifiable superiority of Aegis. The meeting was set for a week later in a sterile, impersonal office building. Bernard Moreau was exactly as described. Sharp, impatient eyes, a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened, arms crossed, as Ivy, heart pounding, walked him through the Aegis system. She didn't dwell on the betrayal, mentioning her previous work only as background, focusing instead on the new technology, the advancements, the data proving its efficiency. She was direct, earnest, and clearly deeply knowledgeable. She didn't try to charm him, she simply presented the facts and her vision. Moreau interrupted her often, firing off difficult questions about scalability, market adoption, competition. He mentioned Antoine's company explicitly. Dubois already has a similar product out. Why yours? Ivy took a deep breath. Mr. Moreau, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. His product is based on technology I developed nearly 2 years ago. It is, by its nature, less efficient. Mine is built on recent breakthroughs, offering double the performance with lower hardware costs. I can show you the side-by-side simulations. She demonstrated the difference, the stark contrast in energy savings. She spoke about her passion for sustainability, her commitment to ethical business practices. Moreau watched her closely. He saw not a smooth talker, but a brilliant engineer with quiet conviction. He saw the genuine article, someone who lived and breathed the technology. He had seen countless entrepreneurs driven by ego or greed. Ivy was driven by the desire to build something excellent, something that mattered. He leaned back in his chair. Dubois, he mused, has a reputation for cutting corners. I've heard things. He didn't elaborate, but his eyes held a flicker of understanding. He looked at Ivy again. You didn't mention your partnership with him, the patent issue. Ivy met his gaze directly. It was a painful lesson, she said quietly. But it taught me the importance of protecting my work and building on a foundation of trust. I chose to focus on creating something new, something better, rather than fighting over the past. Moreau nodded slowly. This wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about character. All right, Miss Laurent, he said, show me everything, the full documentation, the business plan, the financials. I want to see it all. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was the first real opening, the first crack in the wall of skepticism. Ivy left his office feeling a surge of cautious optimism. One gatekeeper hadn't shut the door. He had opened it just a crack and invited her in. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time she felt she had a fighting chance. The due diligence process with Bernard Moreau and his partners was rigorous. They scrutinized Ivy's documentation, verified her claims of technical superiority, and grilled her on every aspect of her business plan. Ivy, who had never managed finances beyond her personal budget, had to quickly learn about projections, burn rates, and valuation. It was stressful, demanding, and exposed her lack of experience in certain areas. But what she lacked in formal business training, she made up for in raw intelligence, dedication, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Moreau saw it. He saw the late-night emails she sent, refining figures based on his team's questions. He saw the clear, logical way she explained complex financial models she had only just learned. He saw the passion that ignited in her eyes when she spoke about Aegis's potential impact. Meanwhile, whispers about Antoine Dubois' company, Dubois Technologies, started to surface publicly. Rumors of mismanagement, inflated performance claims that didn't hold up in real-world testing, and disgruntled former employees hinted at a toxic work environment built on the shaky foundation of his initial deceit. A minor scandal erupted when a tech blog published an investigative piece detailing how key aspects of Dubois' technology closely mirrored designs Ivy Laurent had shared with him prior to their split, citing anonymous sources close to the original project. While the patent technically held, the ethical cloud darkened significantly. Investors grew nervous. The venture capital firm that had initially backed him began quietly looking for an exit strategy. His reputation, built on stolen ideas and slick presentation, began to crumble under the weight of his own lack of substance and integrity. This was the dramatic irony playing out. While Antoine's foundation was proving rotten, Ivy was painstakingly building hers on solid rock. Moreau and his partners took notice. They saw the contrast. They saw Antoine, the charismatic fraud, faltering, and they saw Ivy, the quiet, brilliant engineer, steadily building something real and superior. Their initial skepticism towards Ivy transformed into genuine interest, then respect, and finally, belief. They weren't just investing in a technology anymore, they were investing in her. Bernard Moreau, the perceptive authority figure, became her unlikely champion. He saw beyond the quiet demeanor to the steel core and the extraordinary talent. He appreciated her honesty about the past, her focus on building something new, rather than dwelling on bitterness. The investment deal was significant, enough not just to launch Aegis Systems, but to scale rapidly. Ivy felt a surge of relief and exhilaration, quickly followed by the crushing weight of responsibility. She was no longer just an engineer, she was a CEO. Her small apartment became the makeshift headquarters, then she quickly moved into a modest office space, hiring a small, dedicated team. She surrounded herself with people who valued collaboration and integrity, the opposite of her experience with Antoine. She focused relentlessly on product development, ensuring Aegis delivered on its promises of efficiency and reliability. Initial pilot programs with local businesses yielded stunning results. Energy savings exceeded projections, word began to spread. Aegis Systems, the company built from the ashes of betrayal, was gaining traction. Antoine Dubois' company, facing technical issues they couldn't solve without the deep understanding only Ivy possessed, and bleeding money due to mismanagement and tarnished reputation, began to spiral. Their product, the one built on Ivy's original design, was buggy and underperforming compared to Aegis. Clients were unhappy, funding dried up. The inevitable happened. Dubois Technologies went bankrupt. The venture capital firm that had backed him lost their significant investment. Antoine Dubois faded from the tech scene as quickly as he had arrived, his brief moment of fame ending in failure and disrepute. The office building where Antoine had his brief, ill-gotten triumph now stood as a symbol of his failure. The very investors who had once welcomed him, unaware of the true story, were now looking to recoup some of their losses, and they saw one clear path: Aegis Systems. Bernard Moreau, who had developed a deep respect for Ivy, facilitated the conversation. The pitch wasn't about revenge, it was about business. Aegis was thriving, profitable, and superior. The original investors, humbled and wiser, saw the potential they had initially missed, blinded by Antoine's flash. They saw Ivy, not just as a technologist, but as a capable leader. The acquisition was swift. Aegis Systems absorbed the remnants of Dubois Technologies, primarily for its client list and some usable assets. The office building, once Antoine's domain, became Aegis's new headquarters. It was a moment charged with quiet significance. Ivy walked into the lobby of that sleek, modern building, the same building where Antoine had pitched her idea, where she had felt utterly erased. But this time, she wasn't a consultant in the background. She was the owner, the CEO, the one whose vision and resilience had built something real and lasting. She rode the elevator up, the doors opening onto a floor that was now hers. Her name, Ivy Laurent, CEO, was being placed on the main office door. The silence in the office felt different now. Not the silence of being ignored, but the quiet anticipation of a new beginning. She sat at the head of the conference table, the same table where she had sat years ago, listening to Antoine talk about their future, a future he planned to steal. Now, the future was truly hers. The journey had been arduous, filled with heartbreak, doubt, and relentless effort. But she had not just survived, she had thrived. She had proven that integrity, paired with undeniable talent and unwavering perseverance, was a force far more powerful than deceit. Her success wasn't just a personal triumph, It was a validation of every overlooked individual who was quietly doing brilliant work, hoping one day to be seen. The final scene was not about gloating, but about quiet strength. Ivy stood in her new office, looking out over the city of Marseille that had witnessed her struggle and her rise. The vibrant chaos outside seemed less indifferent now. It felt like the energetic backdrop to her own hard-won peace. She had taken the betrayal, the attempt to erase her, and turned it into the fuel for her greatest achievement. She had not just rebuilt, she had surpassed. She had not just rebranded, she had redefined. She hadn't just won over investors, she had earned their respect, their trust, and ultimately, their capital. Antoine Dubois was a cautionary tale, a flicker that burned out because it lacked a true source of light. Ivy Laurent was the steady flame, burning brighter because it was fueled by authentic passion and unwavering integrity. Her story wasn't just about a tech startup, it was a fundamental human story about value. It was about the difference between perceived worth and intrinsic worth. Antoine had chased perceived worth, the accolades, the title, the money, believing he could create it through appropriation. Ivy embodied intrinsic worth, the skill, the dedication, the character, knowing that true value comes from within and is proven through action. She looked around the office, the quiet hum of her successful company filling the space. This wasn't revenge, it was affirmation. It was the universe, perhaps, correcting an imbalance. It was proof that the quiet work, the ethical path, the refusal to compromise on quality and integrity ultimately yields the most profound rewards. The investors who now supported her weren't just seeing a return on investment, they had witnessed a masterclass in resilience and character. They had seen the hidden gem polish herself under immense pressure and shine brighter than any stolen trinket. Ivy Laurent, the woman who was almost erased, had written her name indelibly onto the future, not with a patent filing, but with perseverance and proof. So, next time you walk past someone seemingly ordinary, someone quiet, someone in a role you might overlook, the cleaner tidying the office late at night, the cashier with the tired eyes, the developer buried in code in a back room, remember Ivy Laurent. Remember that the loudest voices aren't always the ones with the most to say. The flashiest presentations don't always represent the deepest substance. True value, like a hidden gem, often lies beneath the surface, waiting for the right light to catch it, waiting for someone to simply see it. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Don't dismiss the people doing the unglamorous work. They might just be building the future, brick by painstaking brick, code by intricate line, idea by brilliant thought. Their worth isn't determined by whether they are seen, but by what they create. And sometimes, when pushed, when betrayed, they will rise and build something so undeniably powerful, so inherently valuable, that the world has no choice but to finally open its eyes and see them. Look closer, listen harder, and never, ever let someone else define your worth or steal your light. Go build something real.